The Korean War, a brutal conflict fought from 1950 to 1953, stands as a stark reminder of the Cold War's global reach. This war was not just a regional conflict, but a significant chapter in the broader struggle between the forces of communism and democracy. The battles that raged across the Korean peninsula were emblematic of the ideological battles being fought worldwide during this tense period. It was a proxy war, a battleground where the United States and the Soviet Union, the two superpowers of the time, clashed indirectly. The Korean War was a microcosm of the larger Cold War, where both sides sought to expand their influence without engaging in direct conflict. The military equipment and strategies employed were a testament to the technological advancements and military doctrines of the era. Korea, a once unified nation, became a victim of this ideological struggle. The division of Korea was not just a physical separation, but a deep ideological rift that tore families and communities apart. The imagery of a divided Korea serves as a poignant reminder of the human cost of political and ideological conflicts. After World War II, Korea, previously under Japanese rule, was divided along the 38th parallel. This division was meant to be temporary, a stopgap measure until a more permanent solution could be found. However, the geopolitical realities of the post-war world made this division more permanent, setting the stage for future conflicts. The Soviet Union occupied the north, while the United States occupied the south. This occupation was not just a military presence, but also an ideological imposition, with both superpowers seeking to mold their respective zones in their own image. The presence of foreign troops on Korean soil was a constant reminder of the larger global struggle playing out in this small peninsula. This division sowed the seeds of political and ideological discord. The North and South developed along very different lines, with the North embracing communism and the South adopting a more capitalist and democratic system. Propaganda from both sides highlighted these differences, further entrenching the division and making reconciliation increasingly difficult.
In the North, I, Kim Il-sung, a communist leader backed by the Soviets, established the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or DPRK. My vision was to create a strong, self-reliant state that could stand up to the imperialist forces of the West. With Soviet support, we built a formidable military and a tightly controlled society.
And in the South, I, Syngman Rhee, an authoritarian leader supported by the United States, became the president of the Republic of Korea, or ROK. My goal was to establish a government that could resist communist influence and build a prosperous, democratic society. With American aid, we developed our economy and strengthened our military. Both of us harbored aspirations of unifying the peninsula under our respective ideologies. This mutual desire for unification, albeit under different systems, was a driving force behind the escalating tensions. Propaganda from both sides painted a picture of inevitable reunification, but the reality was far more complex and fraught with danger.
Tensions escalated and the stage was set for a conflict that would have far-reaching consequences. The mobilization of troops and the preparation for battle were clear signs that a major conflict was imminent. The leaders on both sides were preparing for a showdown that would determine the future of the Korean peninsula. The Korean War was a defining moment in the early years of the Cold War. It was a conflict that tested the resolve and strategies of both the communist and capitalist blocs. The war also served as a stark reminder of the potential for global conflict in an era of nuclear weapons and ideological extremism. It solidified the division of the Korean peninsula and deepened the animosity between the communist bloc and the West. The war's outcome entrenched the division along the 38th parallel, creating a heavily fortified border that remains one of the most dangerous flashpoints in the world today. The war's legacy continues to shape the geopolitical landscape of East Asia and the world. The Korean peninsula remains a focal point of international tension, with the North and South still technically at war. The lessons learned from the Korean War continue to influence military strategies and diplomatic policies around the globe, making it a conflict of enduring significance. On June 25, 1950, the simmering tensions on the Korean peninsula erupted into open warfare. This marked the beginning of a conflict that would last for 3 years and leave an indelible mark on the history of the region. The North Korean People's Army, armed with Soviet tanks and weaponry, launched a surprise attack across the 38th parallel. This bold move was part of a larger strategy to unify Korea under communist rule, a goal that had been brewing since the end of World War II. The invasion caught the South Korean army and their American advisors off guard. Despite prior intelligence reports hinting at possible aggression, the scale and speed of the attack were unexpected. The KPA's offensive was swift and brutal. Their well-coordinated assault overwhelmed the South Korean defenses, leading to significant casualties and widespread destruction. They quickly overran much of South Korea, pushing the defending forces into a desperate retreat. The rapid advance of the North Korean forces created a humanitarian crisis, with thousands of civilians fleeing their homes to escape the violence. Seoul, the South Korean capital, fell to the communists within days. The fall of Seoul was a significant blow to the South Korean government and a major propaganda victory for the North. The invasion sent shockwaves through the international community. Nations around the world reacted with a mix of shock, condemnation, and calls for immediate action to stop the aggression. The United Nations Security Council, with the Soviet Union notably absent, condemned the North Korean aggression and authorized military intervention to repel the invasion. This decision marked one of the first major actions taken by the UN in its history. The United States, leading a coalition of nations, responded with military force. President Harry Truman quickly committed American troops to the conflict, emphasizing the need to contain the spread of communism. The Korean War marked the beginning of the United States' large-scale military involvement in the Cold War. It was a clear demonstration of the US policy of containment, aimed at preventing the further spread of communism. It was the first time that American troops would fight and die in a conflict against communist forces. The war would see fierce battles, significant loss of life, and acts of heroism on both sides. The war would test the resolve of the United States and its allies. It would also set the stage for future conflicts in the Cold War era, highlighting the global struggle between communist and capitalist ideologies. The initial North Korean onslaught pushed South Korean and UN forces into a desperate defense around the southeastern port city of Pusan. The situation was dire, with the North Korean People's Army, KPA, advancing rapidly and threatening to overrun the entire Korean peninsula. The defenders, a mix of South Korean and hastily deployed UN troops, found themselves in a fight for survival, holding a shrinking perimeter around Pusan. This defensive line, known as the Pusan perimeter, became a crucial battleground. Stretching over a 140-mile arc, it was the last stronghold preventing the complete collapse of South Korea. The terrain was rugged, with mountains and rivers providing natural defensive advantages, but also posing significant logistical challenges for the defenders. American and South Korean troops fought tenaciously to hold back the communist advance. The fighting was intense, with both sides engaging in fierce close-quarters combat. The defenders utilized every available resource, from artillery barrages to airstrikes, to repel the relentless KPA assaults. The bravery and determination of the soldiers on the front lines were crucial in maintaining the perimeter. The Battle of the Pusan perimeter was a brutal and costly struggle. The defenders faced constant attacks, often fighting in grueling conditions with limited supplies. The toll on both sides was immense, with countless soldiers wounded or killed in action. The battlefield was a scene of devastation, with destroyed vehicles, shattered buildings, and the ever-present threat of enemy fire. Both sides suffered heavy casualties in the intense fighting. The KPA, despite their initial successes, found themselves stretched thin and facing mounting losses. The UN forces, though battered, were bolstered by a steady stream of reinforcements and supplies arriving through the port of Pusan. The human cost of the battle was staggering, with many soldiers making the ultimate sacrifice. The UN forces, bolstered by reinforcements and air support, managed to hold the line against repeated North Korean assaults. The arrival of fresh troops and the effective use of air power played a critical role in stabilizing the front. The defenders' resilience and the strategic use of resources gradually began to turn the tide, preventing the KPA from breaking through the perimeter.
While the battle for the Pusan perimeter raged, General Douglas MacArthur, the Supreme Commander of UN forces, planned a daring counteroffensive. Recognizing the need for a bold move to shift the momentum, I devised a plan that would strike at the heart of the enemy's supply lines and force them into a vulnerable position. This plan required meticulous preparation and coordination among the various branches of the military. My plan involved an amphibious landing at Incheon, a strategically vital port city far behind North Korean lines. The choice of Incheon was risky due to its challenging tidal conditions and heavily fortified defenses, but its capture would be a game-changer. The operation, codenamed Operation Chromite, aimed to surprise the enemy and create a new front that would relieve pressure on the Pusan perimeter.
The Incheon landing, executed on September 15, 1950, was a stunning success. The element of surprise, combined with meticulous planning and execution, allowed UN forces to quickly secure the beachhead. The landing involved a complex series of maneuvers, including naval bombardments, airstrikes, and the deployment of amphibious assault vehicles, all coordinated to perfection. The UN forces landed at Incheon, cutting off North Korean supply lines and forcing the KPA to retreat in disarray. The sudden and unexpected assault caught the North Koreans off guard, leading to a rapid collapse of their defensive positions. The capture of Incheon not only disrupted the enemy's logistics, but also provided a vital foothold for further UN operations in the region. The Incheon landing marked a turning point in the war, shifting the momentum decisively in favor of the UN forces. The successful operation boosted morale among the UN troops and dealt a significant blow to the KPA. With the enemy in retreat, the stage was set for a series of offensives that would eventually push the North Koreans back across the 38th parallel, altering the course of the Korean War. Section 4. A new enemy emerges. China enters the fray. Flush with their success at Incheon, UN forces pushed north, crossing the 38th parallel and advancing deep into North Korea. The advance raised alarms in Beijing, where Mao Zedong, the leader of the newly established People's Republic of China, viewed the UN presence near his border as a threat.
In October 1950, hundreds of thousands of Chinese troops crossed the Yalu River into North Korea, launching a massive counteroffensive.
The Chinese intervention caught the UN forces off guard, forcing them into a hasty retreat. The Chinese People's Volunteer Army, equipped and supplied by the Soviet Union, proved to be a formidable adversary. They were highly motivated and skilled in guerrilla warfare. The war entered a new and even more dangerous phase. The Chinese intervention transformed the Korean War from a regional conflict into a major international crisis. It brought the United States and China, the world's two most populous nations, to the brink of direct confrontation. Section 5. Stalemate and attrition. The war grinds on. The Chinese intervention led to a bloody stalemate in Korea. UN and Chinese forces clashed in a series of costly battles around the 38th parallel. The fighting was characterized by brutal trench warfare and massive artillery bombardments. The Battle of Chosin Reservoir, fought in the bitter cold of the Korean winter, exemplified the brutality of the war. American and Chinese forces fought each other to a standstill in one of the most grueling battles in US military history. Despite the heavy fighting, neither side was able to achieve a decisive victory. The front lines remained largely static for the next 2 years. The war settled into a bloody stalemate, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. The Korean War became a war of attrition, a grinding conflict with no end in sight. Negotiations for a ceasefire began in 1951, but the fighting continued while diplomats struggled to find a solution.